We're in section 5.2, and our first learning outcome is describe the structure of a virion and recognize the main parts in a diagram. A virion just means a single unit of a virus, so one virus particle. Every virus has what we call a nucleocapsid, and that nucleocapsid is made of nucleic acid and a protein structure called a capsid. So the nucleocapsid is the minimum structure of all viruses. So notice they're not cells. These aren't cellular parts. They're just chemical parts. So the nucleic acid, as we already said, is going to be DNA or RNA. So in this one, this capsid is a hollow ball, and in this example too, and that nucleic acid, that DNA or RNA, is on the inside. So the capsid, obviously the nucleic acid contains the genetic information, and the capsid, the protein coat, is a protective layer on the outside of that nucleic acid. Some viruses have spikes, not all of them, and the spikes are going to be proteins. And you can see this virus right here has spikes right coming out of the capsid. Other viruses have an envelope. And the envelope is a lipid layer on the outside of the capsid. And so here's an enveloped virus, or one that doesn't have an envelope. We call that a naked virus. And in some cases, the envelope also has spikes, these proteins coming out of the surface. So be able to name those parts on a virion. Recognize the common capsid shapes. And so there's three general shapes that you'll see in capsids. One is elongated. Remember we looked at that tobacco mosaic virus? Let's look back there. We looked at that tobacco mosaic virus, and they're really long. They're kind of long stick-like things. And so what we call that shape of the capsid, what you're looking at there, is the capsid itself. And the shape of the capsid is called a helical virus. So the helical virus is just a long virus. Remember we called long bacterial cells, we call them bacillus-shaped. Well, long rod-shaped viruses are called helical viruses. And so you can see the capsid with the nucleic acid in the center. So that's the whole nucleocapsid. Second kind of shape that's really common is they use the word icosahedral. I think I have in your notes icosahedral, polyhedral. They mean the same things. Polyhedral is a three-dimensional shape with many flat sides. Icosahedral means that it has 20 triangular sides. So an icosahedral is a kind of polyhedral. Your book uses the word icosahedral more often, so I'm going to use that. So an icosahedral shape means you have this capsid with 20 triangular sides. And so this is an icosahedral capsid. The third shape of capsid is complex. And I don't like this example as much as I like the one on the next page. So let's look at that. Here's a complex virus. And what that means is you have multiple parts. And if you look at this virus, it's got this icosahedral head, it's got a helical sheath, and then it's got these other tail fibers and all this weird stuff to it. And if you look at this, here's an electron microscope picture of this virus. These are really common viruses, but could you imagine looking at this cell under an electron microscope and seeing these little things on the surface for the first time? They look like little, I don't know, they look like little Martians or something from outer space sitting on the surface of cells. The complex virus is a very common structure for viruses that we call bacteriophage. And bacteriophage are viruses that infect bacteria. So I want you to know that word because bacteriophage are, they're everywhere. All bacteria can get viral infections, and we call the viruses that infect bacteria bacteriophage. And many of them have this complex virus structure, so they're really odd looking. Here's some pictures from your books just showing you some variations on the different capsids. Here's a helical capsid, and that's oh, there it is, tobacco mosaic virus. It's elongated. It's got the nucleic acid inside. Remember, nucleocapsid means the capsid plus the nucleic acid. Um, the helical capsid can be naked or it can be enveloped. Remember, we said you could have a lipid layer on the outside. That's the envelope. In this virus, oh, this is SARS. This is SARS-CoV-2. Um, the what it is it here's the helical virus. It's kind of coiled up inside of this envelope, and so there's an enveloped helical virus. Here's an icosahedral capsid, and in this one, they're showing you here. It's got 20 triangular sides, and it's oh, there's lots of viruses that are like this, like poliovirus, adenoviruses are really common, and this one happens to have spikes also. Here's a complex capsid, an example of a bacteriophage, and it has that capsid head and the sheath that's helical, the icosahedral head, and all these other parts. So a very cool and interesting looking virus. So I mentioned the viral envelope, and we want to talk about why is the viral envelope important. And it's, first of all, to get an envelope, it's acquired during exocytosis. Now, we haven't talked a lot about how viruses infect cells. We will talk about that when we get to growth, but we're not there yet. But when a virus infects a host, it's living inside the host cell. We said it's an obligate intracellular parasite. So there's a virus, there's a icosahedral virus inside of a host cell. And remember, cells have cell membranes. And what happens is when that virus virion needs to leave that host cell, some viruses take a little bit of the plasma membrane or of the cell membrane with it and surrounds itself. Remember that cell membranes, also called plasma membranes, are a phospholipid bilayer. So it turns out that that's what makes this a lipid layer. So what the virion did is it kind of covered itself up with a little bit of the host cell's plasma membrane. So it has kind of like a cloak around it that makes it look like the host cell. So the immune system, oh, it's a way to package viral proteins. But the big thing I want you to notice is it hides the capsid proteins from the immune system. So if you cover up all those capsid proteins, and this is now floating around in your blood, your immune system, your antibodies and your T cells are going to go, that's a human cell, so I'm not going to attack it. It's a clever way that the virion hides from the host's immune system. Viruses that have envelopes need their envelopes. So if the envelope is destroyed, the virion becomes inactive. The thing about viruses that have envelopes is they actually are a little more fragile than viruses that don't have envelopes. And particularly, we're talking about fragile in the case of they're more likely to be able to be killed by disinfectants and things. So I was really glad to know when SARS-CoV-2 came on, during the pandemic, we're hearing about COVID-19. When I heard that SARS-CoV-2 was an enveloped virus, I thought that's really good because it's much less likely to be able to be stable on an inanimate surface and remain active. They'll become inactive quicker than a naked virus. So it was good for us that SARS-CoV-2 is an enveloped virus because it makes it less stable in the environment, less likely to be spread from person to person. One of the things they did during the pandemic is they were doing things like the New York subway. In between, like at certain points during the day, they would stop and they would spray all the inside of the subway cars down with hydrogen peroxide. to prevent the spread of the virus. Well, after a while, we realized that wasn't necessary because the virus was inactivated quite easily on surfaces, even without adding a disinfectant. So an enveloped virus tends to be more easily inactivated than an enveloped one. But an enveloped virus is more easily inactivated than a naked one. That being said, the envelope, while it's inside of the host, makes it more able to avoid the immune system. So there's a balance there.